appreciative of that, and we're grateful for that, and so we want to say thank you. And so next weekend, there have been, a lot of people aren't scheduled because we wanted you to take the weekend off and to come and just enjoy church. So don't take this as like, oh, they don't need me, I'm going to go somewhere else. Like, come, we got food. There will be food. We got T-shirts as a gift for those of you that have been volunteering for a long time, and then, whatever's left over, you can get some more. But we want to say thank you. So be sure to be here. It's going to be a good time. That's next weekend. And then last thing I want to let you guys know about is we're doing a VBS, right? Like, I'm really excited for that. That is right there, July 23rd through the 25th. More details as they come. We're still figuring out what's good and right and what we can do, what we can't do when it comes to a VBS. It's been a pandemic. It's weird. So we're still figuring that out. But as we figure it out, like, mark it on your calendars. This is going to be our church-wide outreach. So it's not just for kids ministry. Like, we all want to reach this community. We meet in an elementary school. And so we want to reach the people that come here on a regular basis. And we want to reach the families, not just the kids, but everyone. And so we're going to be having a VBS. Again, July 23rd through the 25th. As far as we know, it'll be here. We'll update you if anything else changes. But we're excited for that, making moves towards that end. So aside from that, man, I'm just glad to be here. So we're going to move into a time of worship through song. And then we are going to get into God's Word here this morning. So would you guys go ahead and stand with me as I pray, and then we're going to move into singing some praise. Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for everyone that's gathered here and those who may or may not be on their way as we find our way into this place. We just ask that you would fill this place in a special way. Andy and I were just talking right before the service, and we know that you are in all places at all times. We just pray that you would make your presence felt. Thank you for the opportunity. We ask that you would be here and your presence would be felt as we lift up our praises. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Well, good morning again. Yeah. Hey, so again, Nathan and Gabriella aren't here. And this is not because of the high-speed dog collision that happened last week. This is because Gabriella has had a little bit of stomach issues and struggles. And so, what? All right. Hold on. So, I'm going to talk into both for a second here. So there we go. Hey-o, that's a little bit louder, I think. How you guys doing? Yeah, okay. I can whisper on this one. Okay. Well, Gabriella had some stomach issues. They went to the urgent care. They're kind of figuring that out. Nothing life-threatening, but let's keep the Culbersons in prayer this morning as it's been 3 weeks in a row, actually, of a Culberson in the urgent care. So Jesse had to go a couple weeks ago for like a cut on his finger, and then Nathan, again, headbutting his dog, and then last week, and then this week, Gabriella's not feeling good. So let's just keep them in prayer in general, and just kind of do that. But hey, I'm glad that we're here. You guys doing good? You guys glad to be here? Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. You guys seem semi-okay to be here. All right. That's good. I think this is one of the best seasons of the year. I mean, fall is hands down, like no debate, the best season in existence, all right? But early to late spring, like early spring is kind of rough, but late spring, I like late spring. That's kind of where we're at right now, right? Because, allergies are still here, but we're kind of getting used to them by now, like we've accepted it, and so, that's kind of thing. The wind is beginning to die down some, baseball is back. I got to go to an Isotopes game, right? It's crazy, right? So it's pretty awesome. I feel like this time of year we could have all the good stuff of summer without like the obnoxiously hot heat of summer. You know what I mean? And so I'm kind of happy to be here. That's not to say though that I don't like summer, because I do like summer. Any summer fans? Some of your favorite? Okay, we got one. All right. We'll be praying for you. But yeah, like after the year and a half that we've all kind of experienced the COVID kind of thing, like I could use a little bit of sitting outside, swimming in a pool, sipping on some sweet tea, and eating a watermelon kind of days. Anybody else? Yeah. And like, so I think we're getting there. Like, that's what we're leaning towards. I'm excited. And, so like I said, summer, iced tea, watermelon, right? Anybody love watermelon? Yeah, I love me some watermelon. I think I could exist, just survive. I don't know if I could actually survive if there's enough nutrients, but if I could just have watermelon and tamales, dude, I'd be good. I would be so good mentally. I don't know physically if that would be good for me or not, but I'd be hydrated and happy, so that's good. But here's the problem though, is I have never really known how to tell when a watermelon's ripe. I don't know. I always see people in the store go and knock on the melon and say, "Oh, that's a good melon," but I don't know what it's supposed to sound like. I've never known, and so it's been kind of hard, and so I decided that's enough. I need to know how to be able to tell when a watermelon's ripe, and so I did a little bit of research. Okay, and when I did this, I found out there's 6 things that you can look for. There is the size. Okay. If you find a watermelon and you find 2 different watermelons that are roughly the same size, you find the heavier one, and that's the more ripe one. Okay, there's that. Then you got to look for the spot. There's supposed to be a yellow spot. That's where the watermelon sat on the ground, right? And so every watermelon has that spot. If you find one with a white spot or a light green spot, it's not ripe yet, and it got to be yellow. If it's yellow, it was sitting there longer, right? It means it's ripe. The sound, okay, so I found out it's supposed to sound hollow and resonant, right? It's supposed to sound hollow and resonant. If it sounds like that when you knock on it, that's right. Then you got the shape. It needs to be symmetrical, right? It don't want a funny shape, right? It means it didn't fully grow all the way or just grew in a weird way, and it may not be ripe, so you want a symmetrical one. And then, have you guys ever noticed, when you go in there and you find, it looks like it's a dirty watermelon, like that brown on the bottom? I always thought, why can't you just clean the product before you put it on the floor? No, that's a sugar spot. That's literally, it's so ripe where the sugar is just seeping out of it, right? So that's a sign, actually, of a ripe watermelon. Isn't that cool? And so that, it's not dirty. It's just got sugar pouring out. And then you want a dull kind of matte finish on that puppy, right? You don't want it to be a shiny watermelon because that means it's not ripe, okay? And so I did the research, and I figured out what makes a ripe watermelon. And here's the deal, okay? I have a watermelon here, and I've asked Chris to help me out with this. Okay, we're going to get a little interactive. Yeah, give it up for Chris. That's right. Ooh, ooh, ooh. So Chris is, he told me he loves watermelon more than any other fruit. He did not have too much of it as a child. He would love watermelon, and he's like me. He could just eat it all the time. Now, I found a watermelon. See, there's the watermelon. So, Chris, we showed off here, okay. It looks fairly symmetrical, yeah. Not like Chris's head, but, I mean, so Chris's head is a little weird shape, but that's like symmetrical, right? Does it have a yellow spot, Chris? You see a yellow spot? Okay. It's pretty yellow, right? Okay. Yeah. Is it really? Yeah. Okay, give it a knock. How's it sound? Is it? Can you tell? Does it sound good? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're working well. And then I even found there's not a lot of it, but there's some like those. You see the brown there, like that little. Yeah, I found some of the brown spots, the sugar seeping out of this puppy, right? And so I just okay. So here's what I've asked. I've asked Chris. He's going to cut this thing open for us, all right? Because it's one thing to find a ripe watermelon, to follow this list, but we don't actually know if it's ripe. We don't know if it actually is going to be sweet tasting whenever he cuts into this thing. So we've got to cut into it, and we've got to taste it. And actually, is this already our volunteer? Are you going to be our volunteer? Okay, don't break it. That is one way to do it. So Micah, do you like watermelon? I love watermelon. Okay, stay up here then, because you are going to be the guy to taste it. I mean, you offered yourself up, so go ahead and cut through this thing. And so here's the thing, all right? Like, I want to go ahead and cut through it. You can go for it. I am trying to see if I've learned it, right? Your watermelon, yeah, there we go. It's good? Okay. Because, again, I want to know what makes a good watermelon. Oh, it looks good so far. Okay. So far, okay. So now here's the last thing. We have to taste it to see if it's ripe. So who here, just show of hands, who thinks it's a ripe watermelon? Anybody? Any haters out there? You want to show yourself? Okay, Danny. All right. That's because we had a conversation. You were uncomfortable, and I know. I see. All right. So Micah's and Chris. Honestly, if you want to have a taste, you can too. I know you love it. He doesn't. I'm being sarcastic. Yeah. So Micah, drum roll, everyone, as he takes a bite. Okay. Drum roll, everyone. Drum roll. Go ahead, take a bite. Let's see. Okay. How is it? Is it ripe? It's ripe. All right. Yes. Okay. Awesome. I'm really excited about this. Now, you might be here. Okay, you guys give Chris and Micah a round of applause. Their watermelon cutting skills, their watermelon eating skills. And actually, you guys want to like help get this kind of moved over that way. That'd be great. Yeah, Micah, don't just get your prize and run. What the heck? Watch that knife. Yeah. Okay, so here's the deal. You're like, all right, we're at church, and we just cut a watermelon. What is going on? Okay, this is weird. Promise, there is a reason that we have done this. The reason that I wanted to do this is I wanted to just show that, it can be helpful to have a list of things to look for when you want to identify something, right? Like, we know this. It's one thing to be like, I'm looking for something. It's really, really helpful when you're looking for something specific to know what to look for. So like in the case of a ripe watermelon, you need to have, the size, the spot, the sound, the shape. A sugar spot would be nice, and that, kind of surface needs to be dull. Like knowing what to look for helped me find a ripe watermelon. But there are other things that we look for actively as a people that we don't always know what to look for. And I think one of those things that is difficult to see and to know and to identify in our world today is wisdom. It's wisdom. Like, what is wisdom even? A lot of the times we don't know what wisdom really is. And if we do happen to know what wisdom is, do we know how to identify it in a person or in ourselves? Right? It's, to me, like, do you just walk up and knock on somebody's head, and if it sounds hollow, it means they're wise? Like, what is this? Like, how do you know when someone is ripe with wisdom? Right? Now, you do want to have wisdom. Wisdom is a good thing. In Proverbs 16:16, it tells us that better to get wisdom than gold. To get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. So according to the Bible, having wisdom is better than being rich. Right? Like you want wisdom, but the problem is, again, I think that we don't know all the time when someone is wise. We don't know when we are wise, and so that's why I think today is going to come in handy for us. Whenever we want to find wisdom, James is here to help us out, because he is going to point out to us in these verses we look at what is wisdom. He's going to kind of give to us a list of things to look for in a person to know when they are ripe with wisdom. right? And so James, the half-brother of Jesus, is again, he's going to give us this list to help us know, and he starts in verse 13, okay? In verse 13, he poses a question, and he says this. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" Now, this is a rhetorical question. He knows the answer. He only asked this question so that he could then answer it. So he's going to like, hey, who's wise and understanding? Sit back, relax, and let me tell you. And that's kind of what he's doing in verse 13. He's trying to help us understand when we can know that wisdom is ripe. So if you have your Bibles and you haven't picked up on it already, we're going to be in James chapter 3. So you can turn there now as we continue on in our new game study. That's been our verse-by-verse study through the book of James. And James, and the big theme of James is he's inviting us to get in the game. Right, he wants us to get in and play out our faith. He doesn't want us to sit back and watch anymore as other people live out their faith. When James wrote this, he was writing to a group of people who claimed the name of Christ but were having a hard time living like Jesus. They were struggling to live like Jesus because they were facing persecution. They were going through trials of various kinds. And so they were finding it hard to be bold with their faith. And so James wrote to rile them up. He wrote to wake them up. He wrote to challenge them. He says, listen, like it's great that you go to church and all, okay, but you need to be more than doers of the word. Or you need to be more than hearers of the word. You need to go and be doers of the word. So like that's kind of the big push. The challenge of the book of James is to play this game that we call faith, to pick up the controller and to start working it out, to go for it, not to just sit back. The old days of sitting back and watching as other people live out their faith, those days are over. They're gone. A new game is beginning. And so that's kind of what the whole thing about James is about. And James is fired up about getting people active in their faith. He's fired up, right? Because Jesus is a big deal, no? Like he's the Son of God. He is God in the flesh, and he died on a cross to purchase our forgiveness, to give us access to heaven for all of eternity. I mean, and as followers of Christ, like we're supposed to live for him, right? So he's fired up. He's like, stop sitting back. I want you to get in. I want you to go, right? And listen, I picked James because I'm kind of fired up about that same thing. Like Jesus really is a big deal. And if I'm going to be honest, I think at Rio Church and in general, I've seen as a lot of us have started to kind of nod off, to fall asleep in our faith, allowing other things to take priority in our life. And like, I think that's a bummer, right? Like I get it. There was a pandemic, and that kind of threw everything off. Everyone went through the pandemic, but things are starting to open back up now, and a lot of people haven't returned. A lot of people have kind of stayed home and just doing their thing. They haven't come back. And listen, that's fine, okay? It's not my job to make people be committed to church. It's not my job. I can't make people love Jesus more, but I do think it's a bummer. Right? Because Jesus Christ is our life, and our purpose is to pursue him for all of our days. And so I feel like, as I've looked out over the course of this pandemic, I think it's started to lull us back to sleep. I think we've kind of allowed our routines to be replaced and to let Jesus and our faith become something we add in when we can, right? And so I think I'm tired of that, and that's a bummer. I'm excited. Like, as I look out, I think as things open up, I'm like, man, opportunities are coming back for us to get out and to share our faith, to get up and to get going and to go and to do, and like I'm awake. I'm excited, and I want to wake everyone else up. So that's why we're in James. I'm excited, and I want you to be excited. I want us to be excited about what God is doing in our midst. Like, we have a mission, right? Like, we meet in a cafeteria in a very difficult area to reach, because we have a mission to see every heart in 87104 come to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. That is our goal. That is our mission. Every heart in 87104. And like, that is not my mission alone. That is our mission. I can't do this on my own. I need us to go. Right? And so like, as we're coming out of this, I'm like trying to wake people up. And I think James is going to be the way to wake us up. I think he's going to call us, like, stop being hearers. Let's go and be doers. It's time, right? And so I'm excited. James is excited. All of us are excited. And again, if you're still online watching, like, I'm not digging at you. I think there's still reason for some people to stay online. I get it, right? But like, I'm just saying in general, there are people who, man, they're just falling asleep. And so like, I think it's time to wake up. That's what James is going to do for us. And I think that wisdom, as we kind of get into James chapter 3 today, wisdom is going to be the way that we figure this thing out. Wisdom is going to be the way that we reach our community and every heart in 87104. And so we've been in James for like a month now, a little over a month. We're in chapter 3. And when we began chapter 3 last week, we started dealing with the weight of our words, right? And learning how to tame our tongue. Chapter 3, James talks to us and he tells us about how our tongue is powerful. Our words are powerful enough to control the entire course of our life. And he says, but it's not just that they're powerful. He says they're also destructive, able to set our world on fire and not in a good way. Right, he talks about how our tongue sparks sin and that fire has become an all-consuming, out-of-control fire in our world. And so we kind of talked about that. We talked about how even when we know that to be true, even when we have decided in our hearts that we want to be gracious and kind with our words, we all have suffered from foot and mouth syndrome from time to time. Even when we're trying, we still say things we don't want to say, right? Like every day. Anybody else? Yeah? So we talked about that last week, right? But we also learned there is a little bit of hope for us, right, in taming our tongue. There is a little bit of hope, and the way that we're going to tame our tongue is with this thing called wisdom, right? So that's kind of James's line of thinking here. And he actually has already introduced the idea of wisdom being the way to tame our tongues in chapter 3, verse 2. So if you look at verse 2 of chapter 3, he says this. He says, if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body, right? So this isn't like him being sarcastic. He's not saying it's impossible to tame your tongue outright. What he's trying to do is he's saying, listen, if you are able to hold your tongue, then you could call yourself a ripe or mature follower of Jesus Christ. Right? That's what the word perfect means there. It's not perfect as in without sin. It's perfect as in fully equipped, mature, or ripe, right? So he's saying if you can hold your tongue, that is a sign that you are ripe with wisdom, that you are a mature follower of Christ. So he's already introduced this idea way back at the beginning of the chapter. Now, he's finally going to start to unpack that starting in verse 13, right? Because another way to talk about being mature or perfect or ripe is to be wise and understanding. So he's connecting this idea that you can tame your tongue with the ability to be wise and understanding. A mature and perfect person is a person who has managed to tame their tongue. They are wise and understanding. Right, so you could almost look at verse 13 and read it like this. Hey, you want to know who has a hold on their tongue? You want to know who's wise and understanding? Well, let me tell you. And then he proceeds to give us a list of all of these things that you can look at and look for in someone or in yourself to know when you're ripe with wisdom. Essentially what he's saying in verse 13 is he's saying, like, this is how you know when someone is perfect. This is how you know when someone is mature. This is how you know when someone is in control of their life. And listen, I wish I could tell you that this list was going to be as easy to follow and identify as finding a ripe watermelon, right? Because that was pretty easy. It took me about 5 minutes just because I was like, is that hollow? I don't know, right? So like that was easy, but when it comes to finding out if someone is ripe with wisdom, it's going to be a little bit harder. But again, I think that it will be helpful. I think it will be helpful, and I think that it would be good, it would be wise actually for you to pay close attention to this here this morning, because seeking wisdom in and of itself is considered to be a wise activity. Proverbs 4:7 says that the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. So wisdom is good. Wisdom is what we're going to look at here this morning, and I believe, again, wisdom is how we're going to reach 87104. All right, so with that in mind, here is the first thing to look for when you want to know if wisdom is ripe within a person. You can know wisdom is ripe in a person when it's not flashy. When it's not flashy, okay? James 3:13, look at that verse again. It says this. It says, who is wise and understanding among you? Well, he says, well, by his good conduct, let him show his works in the weakness of wisdom. So if you've been here at all, you've read James before, you know that James is a huge fan of putting action behind your belief, to being a doer and not just a hearer, right? So it kind of makes sense here that when James is telling us to look for someone who's wise, wisdom in James's estimation is not just going to be audible, it will be visible. You'll be able to see someone being wise. That's what he means when he says, let him show their good works, right? You have to be able to see their good works. You have to be able to see their wisdom. But he's not saying that people who have wisdom are flashy show-offs, Right? When he says show your good works, it's not a flashy, forced exhibition of good works like, hey, look at me because I'm wise. Look at me as I do good works. Pay attention. Okay? He's not saying that here in this verse. And in fact, Jesus condemns that kind of behavior in Matthew 6, verse 1. He says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So Jesus is like, listen, do righteous deeds, just don't be a show-off about it. I know, don't be a show-off. So that's not what James is saying. He's not saying, he's not trying to contradict his older brother. He's not saying wisdom means you show off your good deeds. What James is saying is that you should be able to see someone who is ripe with wisdom when you look at the way they live their life. When you look at the way they live their life, it will be marked by good deeds done in meekness. That's what the word good conduct means. Good conduct is their lifestyle, the way they live. By his good conduct, by the way he lives his life, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. And so the wise and understanding among us are those who live a life of integrity, serving the Lord in humility without the need for recognition or fanfare. They just get to work and follow Jesus faithfully. That's what it means to show through your good conduct, your good deeds. Right? So you want to be ripe with wisdom. Right? If that's something you think is worth pursuing, if you want to find someone who's ripe with wisdom, then you don't want to look for a show-off. You don't want to look for a show-off, someone who's tooting their own horn. Wise men and women probably aren't going to try and draw a lot of attention to themselves. They're not typically trying to be flashy or loud with their good works. But I think that kind of poses, that's a problem for us in our society and in our world, right? Because, listen, first of all, if they aren't advertising their awesomeness, how are we supposed to see it? How am I supposed to know? And they're not letting me know about it. So how am I supposed to see this, right? So what are we supposed to look for? Well, again, you're going to have to get into a relationship with someone, have a friendship, go do life with someone. You're going to have to look at their life and take it as a whole. You have to look at someone and say, listen, do they have a track record of doing the right thing? Do they make a lot of good decisions that take them closer to the Lord? What kind of reputation do they have? That's kind of what this is. What kind of reputation does this person have? Do they make sacrifices for the good of other people? Are they faithfully serving God? Have they, time after time, made the right choice? And again, this is going to take time. And that's the other problem. It is that's not what we tend to look for. We live in a microwave culture, don't we? We want the answer fast. We want to know right now. I want to look at you, Google, and know whether you're wise or not. What he's saying is that's not going to fly. You can't do this. This is going to take time. The other problem is that's just not what we look for in our world, is it? When we think about wisdom by the world standards, what we're looking for is the person who has the most degrees. Right? They're the smartest person in the room. We think that means they're wise. We're listening. More likely than not, we're going to listen to the one who talks the loudest about their thoughts and their opinions on everything, right? That's what we're going to think means wisdom, right? They're going to sound like the smartest person in the room, and we're going to rally around them. But James is saying it's a little different than that. It's not to say if you're loud or whatever that you're not wise. It's just saying that's not the mark of wisdom. The way you're going to know if wisdom is right is when you look at their life and you see a consistent pattern of good deeds done in humility. People faithfully following Jesus with no need for the recognition that comes with it. That's how you know. Is when they just get to work and they go. And so listen, I just want to throw this. If you want to be wise and understanding, here's what I'm getting from this. If you want to be wise and understanding, get to work. You want to be wise and understanding, get to work. Do what the word says. And just be prepared to be patient. It's going to take time. Be patient, get to work. Don't just talk about the word. Actually go out and do the word. And that's how you will become wise. That's how you will become ripe with wisdom. Here's another one, okay? Is if you want to be ripe with wisdom, okay, then actually before I do that, this is what I see sometimes is we get that mountaintop high that camp. Who here went to camp and you come back from camp and you're like, Jesus, right? And then 3 weeks later you're just like, where is my Bible? So that's not what it's talking about. Hyperactivity in service, hyperactivity, and it's the long haul, the consistent getting into God's word and going and doing faithfully for a long time, right? Another way that you can do this is if you like get with someone who is wise and you just live life with them. Right? Just go and be wise. Do what they do. Right? Find a mentor. Find someone you believe to be a little further along the road than you are, and then just do the kinds of things that they did, and you might become wise in turn. Right? Like I did that. I got a Chris. Right? You can't have him. He's mine. I'm kidding. He'll probably share. It's fine. That's cool. The wise and understanding among us are those who live a life of integrity, serving the Lord in humility with no need for recognition or fanfare from men. They just follow Jesus, and it's not flashy. Right? It's not flashy. However, there's more to the list. There's more to look for than a non-flashy person, right? I feel like that's like, how do I look for non-flashy? Do I find someone boring looking? Like, what? Okay. Anyways, there's more to it, okay? The next thing that you need to look for if you want to see wisdom is look for someone who's not selfish. Wisdom is not selfish. James 3:14, he says, if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. He's saying, listen, if you are like this, don't say that you're wise because you're not. Right, and so we're going to kind of do this here. Who here remembers Jeff Foxworthy? Anybody like Jeff Foxworthy? A couple people, yeah. You might be a redneck if. You guys know those jokes? Okay, you might be a redneck if you spend more than 40 hours a week at Walmart, but you don't work there. Okay, like that's kind of like, okay. So we're going to kind of take that framework and kind of look at what James is saying here. Okay, you might be bitter and jealous if you get angry when others succeed because it's not happening to you. Right? You might be bitter and jealous if you can't be happy for someone else and celebrate their victories. So like if you're up for a promotion, right, at work, and it's like it's a competitive thing and someone else gets it and you don't, and you're mad at them and you can't bring yourself to go to their celebration party, you can't congratulate them, you might be bitter and jealous. Right? You might be selfishly ambitious if you care more about your success than you do your character. You just want to win no matter what it takes. You might be selfishly ambitious. You might be selfishly ambitious if you don't care about stepping on other people so long as it means that you're moving up the ladder. Right? And this applies in any area. It applies to churches. It applies to everyone, right? You might be bitter and jealous, selfishly ambitious if you do these things. Bitter, jealousy, and selfish ambition looks like an egotistical, self-obsessed, self-congratulating person who would like to build a platform just so they can stand on it and then pat themselves on the back. A bitter, jealous, and selfishly ambitious person will make other people look bad so that they will look better. And that's what it looks like. That's who that person is. And listen, that's what, when you think about the world and like especially like the business world and like, self-help books and things like that is exactly what they say is wisdom. That's how you succeed, is if you can tear other people down, right? Like the guy on the top is the wisest person. So if you want to be wise, then you have to climb the ladder. If you want to be wise, then you have to tear other people down, because if people are above you, it means that you're not on top, which means that you aren't the wise person. You aren't on top, right? That's kind of how the world works. Get the hustle, get the grind, be on top. Don't sleep, don't take time off. That's what it means to be wise. But James is coming in here, and he's saying that someone like that's not wisdom. That is worldly wisdom maybe, but that is not the wisdom that God brings. Wisdom is not bitter, it's not jealous, it's not selfish. Now, you can be ambitious and wise. Right? Jesus actually tells us we can be ambitious. It's just we got to be ambitious and define it in the right way. Mark 9:35, when the disciples are arguing about who is the greatest, Jesus sits them down, and he doesn't discourage ambitions and desires of greatness. No, he just redefines it. He said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be the last of all and the servant of all. And so basically it's just, you can be ambitious, it's not selfish. All right? If you want to be wise, you can be ambitious so long as your ambition is aimed at serving other people. That's what real wisdom looks like. So again, you can look for, if you're trying to be wise, get low. If you want to be wise, serve others. If you want to be wise, do it and don't complain. If you want to be wise, make sure that you are serving others and not being selfish in it, right? Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others as more significant than yourselves. That's Philippians 2:3. That's what Jesus did. That's what we should do if we want to be wise. And that's what you should look at in other people if you want to follow them and learn how to be wise like they are. Right? They're not selfish. They're selfless. Right? So wisdom isn't ripe when it's selfish. And then up next on our list, wisdom isn't ripe if it is normal. Right? Real wisdom isn't normal. Real wisdom isn't normal. Verse 15, he says, this is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic, right? So he's talking about this bitter jealousy, this selfish ambition, right? Bitter jealousy and selfish ambition is not godly wisdom. It is worldly wisdom, and worldly wisdom is normal on earth. That's what everybody's doing. Right, Ephesians 2 says that we were all dead in our trespasses and sins, in which we all once walked, following the course of this world, that we were, by nature, children of wrath like the rest of mankind. Like, that is who we are. That is who people apart from Christ are. That is the kind of wisdom that they operate under. Earthly wisdom is our default setting. It is normal. Bitter jealousy, selfish ambition, that is normal. But if you want to have the kind of wisdom that James is talking about for us here, it's different. It's weird, comparatively speaking. And we want that kind of wisdom because we aren't of this world. John 15:19, Jesus said, if you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. So listen, you want to be wise? Right? Well, you got to get weird. You want to be wise? Do things no one else does. Right? Like, don't worry about the hustle. Right? It's not to say you need to be lazy. It's just saying, like don't worry about the hustle. Worry about your holiness. You want to be wise? Don't focus on cutthroat tactics. Focus on your character and how Christ is building it. That's not something that people do. Right? You want to be wise according to the world? Then don't build your own platform. Build your passion for Christ. We're so worried, I want to be an influencer. I want to build my platform. I want more people to see me. Like stop that. Like, work on your holiness. Work on your character. Work on loving Jesus more. That's real wisdom. The rest will fade and you won't take it with you, but your passion for Christ, that wisdom will carry on. So you want to be wise, get a little weird. Everyone is running the rat race. Everyone is running up the ladder, but Jesus tells us to get low and to look up. He tells us to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and that he'll take care of the rest. That's wisdom. That's wisdom. And again, I think that that's really hard because we want to be like the world so much, all of us. And we have this draw to, like, I want to be successful like this. I want to look like that. Like, I struggle with this as a pastor. I want our church to be bigger, and I want to have our own building, and I want to do all these things. And those things aren't inherently wrong, but that's not what we should focus on, right? What we need to focus on is our worship of God. What we need to focus on is being holy. What we need to focus on is being faithful. That's wisdom, right? So we all struggle with this, and that is what James tells us to do. Right? To focus on those things, to focus on your holiness, to focus on, your character. That's not normal, right? So what this means, practically speaking, is this means that you might have to make some sacrifice if you want to be wise. It means that you might have to make moves at work that aren't going to elevate your status. Right? It means that you might have to say no to working overtime or to working on the weekend. It means that you might have to say no to doing something that's going to put someone else at a disadvantage just so you can get up a little higher. And again, that doesn't just apply at work. That applies all over the place. It's going to take sacrifice, and that is not normal. That is not normal. Real wisdom isn't normal. But that's the kind of wisdom that James wants for us. So wisdom is ripe when it isn't normal, but wisdom is also ripe when it's not falling apart. That sounds a little bit weird, but James 3:16 says, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, right, so where there's worldly wisdom, there will be disorder in every vile practice. What he's saying at its core is he's saying worldly wisdom leads to worse and worse and worse behavior. It starts with being bitter and jealous and selfish, and it gets worse from there. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, right? If you are driven by bitter jealousy and you seek a selfish ambition, then you have to use increasingly evil methods to stay on top, won't you? Because it's normal. That's the cutthroat tactics of the wolves of Wall Street. You're just like, we're going to take shots, and they're going to take shots at you. And so you have to get increasingly more and more evil in your tactics if you want to be wise in the world. It's going to go from bad to worse. Thus, he says, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every evil practice. It gets worse. And so I think that this has more to do with recognizing ripe wisdom than in gaining it for yourself. I think that this is how you just got to look out and kind of see how this works. Worldly wisdom is going to bring about disorder in every evil practice. It's going to go from bad to worse. Worldly wisdom will always seem as if it's on the verge of collapse. They're either going to get to the top or they're going to crash and burn. Like it's going to have that kind of feeling. It's always going to be, someone who has worldly wisdom is going to always seem to be surrounded by strife and drama, and they're going to be sucked into all kinds of dark activities, and like there are going to be entire companies that operate in that manner, and like there's going to be like this whole vibe, this whole culture. You're going to see it. It's going to go from bad to worse. But ripe wisdom is the opposite of that. Ripe wisdom is consistently righteous. Ripe wisdom looks like a brother or sister faithfully following the Lord and growing in their holiness year after year after year. Ripe wisdom looks like a brother or sister who consistently seeks peace with other people and makes peace where there was once strife. That's what wisdom really looks like. So again, it's the opposite of worldly wisdom. It doesn't go from bad to worse. It is consistently Christ-focused, and it's not just consistent as in stagnant. It is an ever-increasing kind of righteousness. It's not just holding the line. It's advancing it. And that's what James says in verses 17 and 18. If you look at verse 17, he says that the wisdom from above. All right, so we've been talking about this worldly wisdom. Now he's just going to straight up tell us, okay, the wisdom from above, the kind that God wants us to have, is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. James basically just lists out a whole bunch of different things that mean that wisdom is ripe. It says it's pure, it's holy, it's without fault, and from this pure wisdom, it moves on to peaceable. Meaning what he's saying here is pure wisdom will seek to bring and keep the peace between people. Peaceable then moves to gentle. Gentle moves to open to reason. Open to reason moves to mercy. Mercy moves to bearing good fruits. Bearing good fruits will move to being impartially seeking unity in all sincerity. Right? So ultimately, what James is saying here, and what he's trying to show us here, is that ripe wisdom is on the move. Ripe wisdom is growing. Just like worldly wisdom, only instead of going from bad to worse, it goes from good to better. It goes from pure to peaceable to gentle, open to reason. It goes on and on. It gets better and better and better. It's growing. It's on the move. Like when you want to look out at your own life and you want to look out at the lives of other people to see if they are ripe with wisdom, you'll see as they build healthy and happy relationships with everyone around them, they will be gentle. They'll be lenient with people, not pushovers, but they will be full of grace, and they'll give grace as often as they can because they know that they need it themselves. They're not going to force their own opinion on other people. They're going to be willing to listen to you. Pure wisdom has an open ear. Pure wisdom is willing to change. Pure wisdom will work itself out through acts of compassion, love, and service. And it'll just keep going and keep going and keep going, and it will produce a harvest of righteousness. That's what verse 18 says. If you look at verse 18, it says that a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Right? So people who have ripe wisdom, they make peace, and then those who make peace will reap a harvest of righteousness in their lives and in the lives of those around them. It grows. It's moving, right? In their own lives, you will see, if they are ripe with wisdom, you'll see as they continue to live in the light of God's wisdom as revealed in his word, and they will look more and more like Jesus every day. You'll run into them, and they look more like Christ. They're more gentle. They're more patient. They're more peaceful.